I would like to say to Ms. Huddle, because I know that you were not here, and it wasn't your fault, but I think it's good to just read I'm not going to do all of it, but my intentions that I really have tonight, and I don't know that everyone was able to hear it because they couldn't be in this room, but it's for everyone to be heard and for all participants, both school board members and the audience, to be respectful and above all tolerant of differing opinions, because we are role models to not only our students, but as parents to our children. I understand this is very emotional. I think we heard that, we see that. I think we know that. And I'm looking forward to the discussion by this board. And I know that everybody that sits on this board, and including Mr. White, who isn't here, care about the students in this district. And this is not a simple issue, but as I said, we are elected to lead as far as policy goes, and this is a policy decision, whereas Dr. Melton's job is to run the district. So I look forward to the discussion. You want to ask questions? Okay. Well, we can't. I'm waiting on a motion. Okay. Ms. Hines.
I move that we repeal policy 80D regarding the face covering mandate effective immediately.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan seconds. All those in favor?
Should we have discussion?
Yeah, well, yes, that would really be bad. That's why we're here. No, now, Mr. I would like you to be the first speaker since it's your motion. And then, Mr. Lovelace, I know that you had questions, and I'll go to you. And then Mr. Hogan, because you seconded it. Is that good? We okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I have thought long and hard about this. I have spoken to parents and teachers on both sides of this issue, and it's concerning that on both sides of this issue, teachers and parents both feel unsafe in having this conversation. I do not make this motion lightly. I understand that there are concerns about removing the mask policy. I have heard the concerns about timing, about testing, about proms, and about safety comfort levels. And I recognize the importance of these concerns. However, while I understand those concerns, my overriding concern is that this existing policy is an overreach of government control. In addition, across the state, almost every local government has said enough. Municipalities and counties have allowed their mandates to expire, or they did not implement one at all. Why would schools continue to implement these policies, especially policies that have no defined end date? Our policy and the State Board of Education's policy does not have an end date. Here's the thing, I'm not speaking as to the virus. At some point, we have to recognize the importance of personal responsibility. I understand that there are people that believe masks should be worn, and I firmly believe that they should have the right to wear a mask, and I strongly encourage them to do so. But their right to wear a mask should not infringe on the right of people not to wear a mask. A watered-down mandate is still a mandate, and there is no discretion at the word, there is no consistency with the word discretion, and that is concerning.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. And then I will go to your questions, or would you like this person that's second to go first?
Let Mr. Hogan, and then I
Mr. Hogan, we'll do that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairwoman Hammond. So I did second this motion. I feel I've been pretty clear from the very beginning that I did oppose this policy. I opposed the policy in 2020. It was passed. I still oppose it today. When we really break it down, the concerning verbiage to me is it's a mandate. And when there's a mandate, we remove the word choice. And where this really stands is this is a choice going forward.
Okay. Mr. Lovelace.
I have 5 questions, and I want to ask these of Dr. Melton because I feel like that I don't have anybody else to ask them to, and I have tried to do my homework on the issue. So the first one, and where I'm coming from is, I wear the mask in the meeting because we ask our employees to wear the mask everywhere. And I feel like that we should lead by example, regardless of my personal feelings about anything. So I ask these with, with the understanding that I know that some things are not cut and dried, and some things have to be left in the control of people that we trust, and not just this board. But anyway, my first question is, has any official with the South Carolina Department of Education told you that if we were to defy the State Board of Education's policy on face coverings, that we would lose any sort of funding?
No, sir, I have not heard that.
Okay. Second question is, and I've seen this, I don't know where I saw it, but has any official with the South Carolina Department of Education told us that if we defied the State Board of Education's policy on face coverings, that we would lose the use of school buses?
Mr. Levis, I'm looking at the State Department of Education guidelines. There are expectations that are outlined for the use of buses, but I do not see that there would be a loss of buses.
Okay. Now, at our last meeting, we discussed this, our last regular meeting. And I understand that at the time, there was a letter written to one of the board members from the State Superintendent of Education. And I wanted to find out, was that letter, it states, in my opinion, having read it after the fact, after the meeting, it states that the state board would not waver on its current policy. And the last paragraph of that letter, I think, states that. And it says that, in my opinion of what I've read, it says that they would reconsider the policy after the end of this, of the 2020-21 school years. Is that correct?
Mr. Levis, you may have lost me with that. So I've got the letter from Superintendent Spearman. Will you ask me that question once again?
I was just referring to the last page of that letter.
Yes, sir.
It's on us, would you, I've read that, and I thought that it said that they were not going to change their policy during the 2020-21 school year, and that they would reconsider during the 2022.
May I read this paragraph,
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
Lovelace?
ma'am.
That may be of assistance. And the memo that Mr. Lovelace is referring to is from our State Superintendent of Education, Molly Spearman. The paragraph reads that he's alluding to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lovelace, the current policy will remain in place for the remainder of the 2021 school year. As we anticipate COVID-19 vaccines becoming available for the majority of the school-age population over the summer, I will move for the current policy to become a recommendation rather than a requirement at the conclusion of this school year, as students will have been afforded the same virus protections adults currently enjoy. That's the last paragraph of the letter received, dated April 26th.
Right, okay, that's what I was referring to. So that is a requirement of the state of South Carolina that we have a mask policy at least equal to or equal to their policy, correct? If we don't have a policy, they're going to enforce their policy?
We would revert to what is entitled, and I'm shuffling a lot of documents here because I want to make sure I had information properly for this evening, entitled South Carolina Department of Education Face Covering Guidelines for K through 12 Public Schools, dated August 3rd, 2020, issued by our State Board of Education.
Okay, so my question is, and I don't know how things work with the State Board of Education, but if we were to repeal this policy ADD, that the state government's policy would be in place of our policy?
That is my understanding. The State Board of Education expectations and guidelines would be expected to be employed across South Carolina public schools. That is
Okay.
my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay, so, and I hate to go back, to the discussion that I was on the board last year when we had the discussion and we voted, the policy was approved. Okay, one of the key points that I remember asking, and I think other board members do, and I may not have been the one to ask, but I remember commenting on it, was that the superintendent would have discretion over the meaning of her designees. Okay, and I came away from the discussion, and I'm not saying that everybody did or did not, but I came away from the discussion with a distinct impression that that meant that classroom teachers would be able to have the discretion within their latitude over certain phases of mask use. And we talked about in crowded hallways and all that we wouldn't, that there wouldn't be no latitude, but in the individual classroom, there would be latitude. Last week, we received a communication from you that the school principals were your designees, which I understand because, that's a role that they're supposed to fill. But I also understood from the discussion when we passed this that the teachers would have latitude. Okay, and my question is, since the principals are not in the classrooms, and how can they determine the proper latitude?
Here's where I'm trying to be succinct for understanding versus going to a dry erase board and sketching things out. I think you all know me well enough to know that I'm a person that uses data and applies information. So of our 24 principals, I have had an involved role in 21 of 24 hires in this district. And I say that because obviously there are relationships that have been longstanding, but if all 24 principals were in this room, I think they would share with you, we have a close working relationship. So Mr. Levis, with answering your question, and I appreciate that you've asked me this because I understand that there's a sense of my not accepting my roles and responsibilities and the conversation about, let me see if I can make sure I use it correctly from what I've received in an email, that I would need to be micromanaged to make sure that this is implemented. That is not the need whatsoever. Leadership does not come in a handbook. And if someone is expecting me to record bulleted information or numbered information, then I would say that person or those people and I do not have a shared definition of what leadership really is. So instead, executive staff that are available to attend this evening can tell you with every principal's meeting, we conclude with scenarios. And with this conversation, our principals are expected to be in classrooms. I expect our principals to be in classrooms. I expect our principals to have stakeholder involvement. I expect our principals to be in communication with teachers and teacher leaders. And I can present to you information tonight because, of course, I had no direct idea of which way this is going, so I'm prepared for a variety of things. I almost feel like I could cross-examine as an attorney this evening. So, Mr. Levis, to get back to your question and to make sure that I'm not leading you in an attorney mindset, I have trusted that the designee being principals and/or our administrative teams, because if we allow our teachers, first of all, it is not fair, in my opinion, to put that shoulder responsibility on teachers and then for students to be confused of where does that apply versus where it doesn't. So for consistency and for teachers to have that vetting and calibration, it's important for me to know that our principals are involved with the conversation, but I would also say that our principals are not in all places at all times. So I have heard from several board members how teachers have shared that they know that they've been given discretion. I've heard from several board members that many teachers have not experienced their own problem because they have had that professional respect. And I use the word respect because I'm not asking for trust, but I am asking for respect. I stand behind all 24 principals, and if there is a place where there is an issue, I would hope privately someone would let me know that so that we could support that principal's success.
Okay. Let me clarify that I was not questioning whether or not the principals were qualified to do that. What I was saying was that if you know, and you can see this clearly, this board makes policy, but you know, where the actual work is done, you know, we're not in there every day.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what I was asking basically was that teachers would have to earn the respect of the principal to be a designee, in my opinion, okay? I mean, not everyone would be a designee, but with that earned respect, I think that teachers within their, this is where the word respect comes in, within the classroom would have some leeway, you know, to do
Yes, sir.
things
I
differently
agree.
than, and not every, I think I used a scenario with you earlier this afternoon. If you had a elementary school situation, would be definitely different from adult education. I mean, that would be two different ends of the spectrum, but if this, you know, and therefore latitude may be, you know, justified. But, okay, I wasn't asking you or any way to say that your leadership has not been good. I
No,
was
sir,
just
I understand,
asking
and I
for
appreciate the question, but, and
Yeah.
your ask of that question is inclusive of some things that you're aware of that have been questions that the board has received.
Right.
So I appreciate that you have read emails as you're prepared for this evening.
Yeah.
But, yes, sir, thank you for that.
Okay, well, the last question, and this is, I want to know basically, if our policy is in any way more stringent than the state policy, are there ways that you would recommend, and I would love for you to recommend what you think we should do in this situation? Because again, we're not in there every day, and we have no right to make an inference into things that we're not there for. But what I would like to know is, what is your recommendation, and is there any way that we could relax some of the requirements that may be more stringent than the state in our policy, so that we could come to more or less a compromise on the issue?
I can't say, Mr. Levis, I'm prepared for that, but I can, those who are instructionally minded know what a Venn diagram is. It's a graphic organizer where you compare differences and similarities. The staff and I have taken District 5 policy ADD and the State Department School Board expectations and put them side by side. Yes, sir, there are differences, and we've identified places where there are similarities, but we've also identified places that are very different. If you lay the two, and I suspect this board has because I've shared them both with you, of course, you've had access already to ADD, but when you lay the two side by side, you're going to see that District 5 tried to position our staff to take away some of those variables of the calibration piece and the defining as opposed to individual interpretation, to take away that stress or that confusion. So for example, if you look at policy ADD of District 5, you're going to see a section about visitors. But if you look at the department, you do not see a portion of that about visitors. Well, the department doesn't have to deal with visitors being quite the same as school districts do. So when we received information from the department and we received the model policy from School Boards Association, that was written through a lens of on-site understanding of management of school sites that was able to add an additional layer for issues that we knew was going to be of interest. Another example of how some things differ, the department includes school buses, but if you look at ours, we are specific as to say by school buses what we mean by transportation. The department has things about car rider lines. So we've got to look at those two things and where did we see places that we needed to detail for consistency, because we knew that we were going to have parents comparing what one school was doing compared with another. So although I've got this, I don't have copies of this, but we can provide these to the board if that is of interest, and I can certainly make this more professional than it is with my sketch that I've done. So I don't know that I answered your question, Mr. Lovelace, but
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I would hate for us to make a decision on something that there could be compromise on. And you know, if there were areas that we could, you know, make some of this, I mean, you know, world is based not on rigidity, but it's based on flexibility, and we're in a situation where we're trying to be as flexible as we can, yet keep rules, you know, so that we have a guideline to follow in. So anyway, that was what I was trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lovelace. I want to get to everyone's, because we do have a motion on the table and a second, and I think your questions were valid, and I do commend Dr. Melton. She did do that work for me, her staff, and she was kind enough to send it to all the board members about the differences in the policies. And so, you know, hopefully we've looked at that. But let's go to either Ms. Huddle or to Ms. Gardner. I want both of you to have your opportunity for questions. And as I said, I think we want to ask our questions that pertain maybe directly to this motion, and then in case like Mr. Lovelace, I think it's talking about some idea of knowing what we would still be liable for. I understood that if this motion passes. So if that, I hope I'm getting the right drift from that. Ms. Gardner.
I think I just wanted to clarify too, it's not really a question, it's just my thoughts on this. But in repealing this entire policy, it would mean that our school district would not have a face covering policy, which would mean that we can't mandate anyone to wear a mask, not a visitor, not a staff member, not a student. And the reason I think this is a good idea is because the mandates right now are causing the division. It's not just there's the division because we're required to follow a rule that some of us feel it hurts our children and that some people feel that it helps the adults. I haven't heard many people say it helps the children. I will say that I've been personally promised myself a long time ago that I would, if I wasn't sure what to do, I would always go back to the children and the students. And I haven't heard, I've had one email today that talked about the students and how it would be disruptive to unmask them. And it was very sincere and I appreciated it. It is the only one that I've received that talked about students. But I have received many, many phone calls, texts, emails, you name it, that have talked about how when they mention students, they talk about how the masks are detrimental and that there are many, and this is what I'm concerned about, many unintended consequences. But ultimately, what really bothers me about the whole thing is that when we remove the ability for us to have a choice to do the right thing, a choice to show care and loving, a choice to mask around others that we feel might be high risk, a choice for us to make a moral decision, we remove that. We're not teaching morals. That's not teaching morals. That's not teaching our students and as a community, it's not teaching us to make the right decision. It's dividing us, and it really, really bothers me that this is so divisive. But I like the idea of not having a mandate policy, that it becomes a choice for students, for parents, for teachers, and for people coming into our school district. And I think that we can ask nice for people to wear their masks. But I don't think we should mandate any longer because I feel it is overreach and that there are unintended consequences, like it's dividing our community and it's teaching our children to be divided too, and I don't like it. So that's my 2 cents. I didn't have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Ms. Huddle.
I don't have any questions either. I'm glad I got to go last because I truly am divided within myself on this issue. I hear the pleas of, let's just wait, it's 38 days, why can't we just get through 38 days? But I also look at the hot weather forecast, and we're going to school through June now, and the highs in early June are in the upper 80s to lower 90s. I also hear the teachers who, for what may not have been able to get vaccinated because of pre-existing conditions, and their concerns that they may be exposed because the virus is circulating among children. I'll be honest, I really wish we weren't even here. I was kind of hoping that some flexibility would be done within the existing policy. So I'll just kind of leave this here. I personally could live with extending the current policy if we made it more flexible while still staying in lockstep or close to lockstep with the South Carolina Department of Ed policy. My reading of that policy, so Mr. Lovelace, you didn't ask me this, but I want to answer it. I've looked at it a lot, and my reading of it is that there are several subtle differences, but the 3 biggest differences are that teachers can actually take their mask off under certain circumstances and use a shield. And I've heard from teachers who want to be able to take their mask off. The second is that teachers are the designee. It's very clear in the state policy that teachers have the ability to let students take their mask off within certain conditions. And I think it's pretty clear we could exempt outside. So I'm going to step back and kind of listen to the rest of this, but I'll say I could go that way and I could go with Ms. Hines after listening to all of this. And I think, Ms. Gardner, you make a really, really good point that in our ethics, it says always put children first. And the difficulty I'm having with the let's just wait is I don't know what's going to change. I really don't. I think we have 0 staff and 1 student now with the virus, or the other way around. And I've had a lot of people emailing me and say, well, it's going to change in the fall when the students get the virus. I don't have a crystal ball, but anybody wants to have a bet over free dinner or whatever, I don't think that the FDA is going to approve the vaccine for students as a fully tested non-emergence. And I know a lot of parents aren't going to get the vaccine for their kids under that circumstance. So what's going to change between now and the fall? I'm really not sure what. So I'm not saying what I'm going to vote, but I'll tell you I'm divided, but I feel like at the very least, we need to make this policy not so stringent.
Before I speak, Dr. Melton said something she'd like to add.
I cannot even explain how much time Ms. Hammond and I have been talking, and the officers and all board members, of course, have given a lot of time and attention to this, this discussion. So just some points that I'd like to make sure that Ms. Hammond and I have talked about, and some other things that I've thought up with the staff. We have 32 days remaining in school for this academic year. When I look at, and I've asked my staff, how many staff complaints have been recorded with names or anonymous? The answer is 0. How many faculty advisory have expressed concerns? 0. Support advisory, 0. Parents advisory, 0. How many student disciplinary issues have made it to the district level? 0. How many reentry emails have we received since April the 3rd? 0. How many have we had COVID-related reasons cited by our staff for resignations? Yes. Have we had retirement cited because of COVID? Yes. Have we had use of leave by our staff because of COVID? Yes. Have we had requests for remote work from our staff? Yes. I heard mention of the flu earlier. We've had 9 reported cases based upon the information that's been reported to us. I heard about playgrounds earlier. Our playgrounds are open and operational. So I would hope that people that are speaking are in tune with District 5. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I celebrate for the 2021 year based upon data of April 29th that this board heard. School District 5 has a 99.7% fill rate. I would put that next to any district, not just in the state, but across this nation. For the 21-22 year, as of April the 29th, we have a 94.5% fill rate. A 94.5% fill rate. When Dr. Turner and Dr. Wicker go to state-level meetings, they are likely the envy of the room. When I look towards data, again, and this was based upon emails received between April the 28th and May the 3rd at 11 o'clock. That's Monday morning at 11 o'clock. And this is not an invitation for some friends out there to start, have your vote counted, send an email Dr. Melton this email address, and you're welcome to email me. Many have. I can celebrate that our email system is operational. But this is just a point of data and time. Of the emails that I received between April 28th following the governor's press conference and Monday morning at 11 a.m., 45% of those that oppose masks are District 5 parents. 55% of those that oppose are community members with no known students in District 5. That's a divide in our community, but also a divide in who's speaking in our community, in my opinion. Of those that supported masks, 60% of those that emailed are staff members asking to keep masks. And again, I'm not suggesting that people go to their email this evening to email their thoughts and their opinions, but I do hope that will dispel people feel they have a reason for voice and that they are heard. You heard already this evening about the false security. I celebrate that nearly 700 employees took the opportunity with our partnership with Lexington Medical to become vaccinated. But we have staff who are not able for their own medical conditions that are confidential and private that we cannot share. And back to the motion of effective immediately, I would ask you to respect the work of this staff of how many details that's going to affect. Ms. Goggins has drafted me 4 potential phone blasts to send this evening, depending on what time this conversation ends, but it's 6:40. So what time are we going to let our parents know, and what time are we going to let our staff know what to expect tomorrow if this is effective immediately? What's going to happen with scheduling of students? Because we're already having parents email saying, if this is changed, we want to go back to 5, when we've already closed 5. That's already been staffed. So I would ask again for respect of the work of us as professionals. And then the last point, Ms. Hammond, before I stop, and you and I have talked about this one a lot, Senate Bill 147. This is a law because our governor has signed it. This board has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the district. And I know that you all have studied and prepared for that. So, Ms. Huddle, I understand why this is so conflicting. I understand why you have that internal divide. I get it. But I ask you all to look at a broad scope of things that I'm responsible for as the superintendent of this school district. Ms. Hammond, I hope those points are of assistance to the conversation.
I appreciate that. I also, while the motion is still on the floor and we haven't voted, I have a request from Mr. White that if there is a motion made on the mask policy, he'd like for me to read the following statement on his behalf in discussion portion of the motion, and that's what we're in. I apologize that I was unable to attend the meeting tonight, but I wanted to make my position clear to the board and the public. I oppose any modifications to the mask policy prior to the end of the current school year. As a board, we adopted a mask policy and gave the superintendent discretion in the implementation of the policy, and that is how we should leave it. There have been numerous concerns communicated to us about loosening the mask standards and the negative impact it could have on students. If COVID cases and quarantines increase and interfere with student exams, with approximately 17,000 students in our schools, we need to make decisions for the greater good of the entire student population and not just based on the concern of the few who have contacted us to request we modify the policy this late in the year. Again, my position is we leave the policy as it exists today through the end of the current school year. Thank you, Ed White. I have not weighed in, but I understand the conflict. I understand the actually the implementation, you know, as Dr. Milton's talked about, and all of a sudden. I believe that there's room, and this is just me, I believe there's room for us to, maybe with this motion, vote it up or down. And then if there is any new motion that could, because we said revise or delete, and I feel like with the motion that's on the table, we need to do up or down to that. And then we can entertain any type of, and I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, Ms. Gardner, this that you gave us in the red where you wrote the policy of ADD, face covering, you put the red ink is where you were thinking of some changes or some revising of our policy?
Yes, but those are, we can't talk about that because that's not the motion, the current motion.
No, I know that, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure before, because I'm advising the board, because we can vote this up or down and delete the current policy. I will say this. I think I was on the board like Mr. Lovelace. I think the policy passed by the former board is not as clear. And that's what I appreciated Dr. Milton this week. We talked about clarifying that. She did that. But we've gone the whole year based on this policy. And I think if I heard Ms. Hines right in her motion, and when she spoke to it, and Mr. Hogan, that what you are opposed to is just having this mandate. So let's vote this up or down. The motion's on the table. And then if there's any other entertain of what we want to do. Ms. Hines, certainly.
Can we continue the conversation? Because it's important.
Sure, you can.
I just want to say But Dr. Melton, I hold you in the utmost esteem. And to be completely honest with you, I was not one of the board members that asked for this meeting. When it was called, I was out of town. I didn't oppose it because I will be at any meeting anytime that I'm asked to be at a meeting, and I understand that it's important. But I saw this agenda at the same time that everybody else saw this agenda, and I'm being asked to have this conversation now. And like I said at the beginning, I'm struggling with this internally, just like Ms. Huddle. And I hate to, I try really hard to be objective for parents and for teachers and for staff. But I was at the meeting when this policy was adopted, and I felt so strongly, and that has never changed. And because we are being asked to discuss this now, this isn't about the implementation of the policy or any of that. It is that I think that I strongly feel that this is an overreach, and that our policy and that the State Board of Education policy is an overreach. So whether it's our policy or we amend it for it to be the state policy, I don't agree with it. And so it's hard for me to reconcile that, because I understand that I have spoken to so many people that don't agree with me, and I understand. I respect their opinion, and that's why we have 7 members of this board, and that's part of how we operate. And I will respect any decision that comes out of this board today. I just feel that strongly about it, and because I am a parent, and because this is about the kids. I ran for this seat because I have a child in this district, and I have another child entering the district next year, and I'm around the students in District 5. I have a 7-year-old who is scared to pull her mask off around anyone, who doesn't smile. And I hate bringing this up because we represent every student in this district, but that is happening. And that's hard as a parent. We are conditioning our children to be scared, and I feel like we're conditioning them to be scared because of politics, and that worries me. And so I'm willing to amend the motion, the effective immediately part of my motion, because it may be hard to implement for tomorrow, but I don't see that as a long-term thing. I have spoken to teachers, like I said, on both sides of the issue. I've had teachers say, Rebecca, if it is the last day of school, please take this take this mask off of my face so my kids can see my face, so that I don't go home with a headache on the last day of school. And they are just as passionate as the teachers that I very strongly respect that came in here today, that have their own fears. I respect their fears. This is about choice. It's about the choice. And it's not about how I feel like the district is implementing the policy that I did not vote for because I was not on this board. I think our district does the very best that it can, and I have like I said, I have the utmost respect for you and for all of your staff, because I know you work extremely hard. This is about what I feel is right, and it is not an easy decision to make, because I know that there are people that I respect very much that do not agree with me. But that is why I'm sitting at this table and why we have 7 members of this board.
And we are asked to put your heart into it, your conscience into it, and vote your conscience. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Huddle.
Dr. Melton, if this were to pass, how long would you prefer to be able to implement it?
We have details that we would need. We brought to the board several meetings ago. Dr. Harris stood before this board. And I guess I need to say, for context, to me, it doesn't matter what board did what. It matters what the Board of Trustees is doing and how we as a staff can support that. And of course, I was involved with this policy at the time, as everyone knows. But the piece about scheduling, if we're going to allow students to go back to 5, the disruption that's going to cause and the numbers that could possibly be, and the stress and strain that's going to place on our staff in the midst of testing windows, But if we say that we're not allowing students to go back, then what are we going to do for those families that truly have conditions of fear and for those staff that truly have concerns of their own health? We could have another shortage of coverage and substitutes that it'd be very difficult for us to manage. So it's more complicated than I can respond, but I appreciate your question and your awareness that is larger than most could imagine.
Is 5 currently open?
No, ma'am, it is not. It is closed.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So, Dr. Melton, I was thinking that if it was closed, so you're saying if you had a child or a parent that would decide with no mask, they're not going to go to school, you would have to change that rule?
Well,
Or
we
would you
would
not?
not have to change the rule, but if we're talking about what's best for children, it's best for children to be educated. And
Amen.
because it's best for children to be educated, if a family was not comfortable, it is my responsibility to find the best fit, since this is a year of a pandemic. People may disagree whether it is or whether it isn't, but we're in that state of operation where District 5 and other public schools are doing things like never before. So we have said consistently, 5 in a pandemic is different than 5 that's a choice program for the coming academic year. So knowing the urgency that we have to finish this academic year strong, to have students properly prepared for success for the coming years, we would have to look as a staff, and Dr. Harris would likely have his inbox flooding. It may already be happening this evening during this conversation. But we would have to look to see what, and then I need to know, do I bring it back to the board to get your permission to open it back up? And Ms. Blackburn-Hines, I appreciate your concern about overreach, but I hope that we're sensitive to that local issues as well. Because if there are certain things that I need to have discretion to do as administrator of this district, then I trust that this board will get behind it and give me that permission rather than having to come back to the board. Because just as you all had to change your schedules, the staff of ours that's here this evening to manage this meeting had to work an extra evening that they had not planned to work as well.
Mr. Hogan?
Dr. Melton, can you let us and the public know if a student was to decide not to take his mask off during this mandate in place, what disciplinary actions would be in place? And has that been an issue, or not an issue, but has that come up prior?
I'm going to ask Dr. Harris to assist me with that. Mr. Hogan, what concerns me is there may be some parents, and I hope this wouldn't happen, but unfortunately I'm aware that it has happened some, of telling their children to be defiant and to push this conversation. Dr. Harris, when I reported earlier that 0 cases or students been brought to the district level, you are aware of issues and incidents at school levels. So could you speak to that, Dr. Harris?
Absolutely, thank you, and good evening to all of you. Thank you, Ms. Hogan, for the question. While there have not been any cases that have escalated to the district office, i.e. recommendations for expulsion, there have been, over the course of the period of this year, there have been instances where we've seen a number of questions from parents about their child having to wear a mask. In terms of your question, and specifically as to how do we address that, that is something that we have addressed individually at each school per student. Does the current policy advise or suggest something by way of discipline? It does. However, we believe very strongly that the way to address this, because it's been new to all of us, the mask idea, is that we address it at the lowest possible level. And overall, what I have seen at the school level is that the administrators, and I would include teachers in this as well, have done their due diligence to keep it at the lowest possible level, meaning conversation, administrative conference with parents, perhaps referral to guidance or school counseling for conversation to really understand what's required and what's been asked of students and staff as it relates to masks. So it has been at the lowest level, but I dare not say that there have not been any cases where it has not had to be addressed. It has, just not at the district level.
Did you have a hand up, Ms. Gardner? And I didn't see it. Will you finish, Mr. Hogan? I'm sorry.
I still go back to my stance that the choice would create more community instead of division. And Dr. Melton, I still did not hear you focus on the children and all of the things that you said. It's all about emails with the children. I didn't get any student email. I might have gotten one. But I wonder if this would be a different discussion if we had divided out elementary and secondary schools. And if that would be something that would be easier to implement. But I still feel like in here, and this is the point I was going to make, sorry, I have to circle back to what we were talking about before. I actually have been made aware of people who are in 5 that aren't in school because of the mask mandate. So I think there's going to be a switch for some, and so it will open up some spaces, maybe not a lot, but I do know that it goes both directions, and it maybe not, but I think that it's important to note that there are people on both sides in 5 on this issue.
I would like to take the vote up or down on this motion.
Ms. Hammond,
Yes.
can I make an amendment?
You'd rather make an amendment? I was going to vote up or down on it and then offer and see if there were other motions.
Okay.
I think
Can I?
that would be cleaner.
I think I have to make the amendment first. I amend the motion to read effective Monday, May 10th, and give the superintendent the latitude, if she so wishes, to open up 5 to the degree it works. That wasn't very well worded, but
All right, so we need to let you read your motion again?
I'll second her amendment.
Okay, so we'll talk about it. Now, we had if I could, Ms. Hines, I would go back to your original motion to just to be reread while we discuss that one, because this would be added to that. It's not undoing it. Okay, that was my
Right.
point.
So my original motion was that I moved that we repeal policy ADD regarding a face covering mandate effective immediately. So with her motion, it would be effective May 10th with the discretion of the superintendent to allow 5 to reopen as necessary.
That was good, Ms. Hines, that you could remember that. Okay, so we've had an amendment to the motion, and we got a vote on that. Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. And that is 6. All those opposed, 0. So that motion carries.
I have
Do we
a
go back to the, well,
housekeeping question for you.
I got to go back to the,
Okay,
no, I go back to the original motion.
for the original motion.
I'm sorry, but do you need a question on that?
Yes, my question is, do we, if we pass the original motion, can we then go back and make a new policy ADD after that point, or is that going to be prohibited after we pass Ms. Hines's motion, if it passes?
Well, I think if this motion, Mr. Lovelace,
I mean, would
you-
there be
you
an
have a total
opportunity to
different-
amend it again, to make another
yeah, I
amendment?
think that you would be amending the amendment, I think is what you're trying to do, which maybe you have the right to do, but may be confusing.
I think he's asking if the motion does not carry, can you make another motion?
Oh,
And
sure.
I'm pretty sure the answer is yes.
Yes.
If the motion
Oh, I'm sorry.
carries, can we then go back and no?
No.
So that's,
Not unless you're on the winning end.
okay,
Right.
And then you can ask for a,
okay.
Well,
what's it called?
Let's vote on this, and then, of course, we can see where we fall, because we don't know for sure. All right, all those we voted on the amendment, it passed. Now we're voting on the original motion with the amendment added to it, okay? And so all those in favor, raise your hand. 4. All those opposed, 2. So it carries 4-2. Okay. Now,
Jan?
yes,
As a matter of sort of housekeeping too, we need to, this might be out of order, but we probably, not out of order, but we're not doing it in the right order, is that we probably did need to vote to suspend our rules to allow for the one-and-done reading of the policy. Yeah.
I thought that we had asked and that we could do this because this was the only item on there, so it's the assumption.
So it's the, okay,
That was,
that's
that
fine.
was what
I
Dr.
was just-
Richardson told me.
That's what they said? Okay, then never mind. I was just making sure we
If
were
I'm
doing that
wrong,
right.
Ms. Huddle, you're the one that knows all that. But that's my understanding, because it's the only, I think she used the word, it's understood, because it's the only item on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't think it would hurt.
Well, because we approved the
Agenda, yeah,
agenda,
then we're
so
fine.
it makes it, yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we were doing it right.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, I have a question for you then.
Okay.
Okay, since the motion passed and we've gotten rid of policy ADD, now we go back and we are ruled by the State Board of Education's policy. Okay.
All right, you had a question about his question?
I would think we would need clarification because it would be my interpretation that we don't have a policy right now. And I know that there have been some other school districts that did not adopt the state mandate and they don't have a mask policy. So I would seek clarification on that, personally. And I would also I want to say that, you know, just because we don't have a mandate is not that we don't have a choice. And I think that we need to be able to use discretion and be able to accommodate students that do need, you know, that want to wear a mask or that have, you know, individual needs on a case-by-case basis. I mean, that needs to be addressed because I know that that will be a concern and that we would need to have flexibility in the next month because we are in a unique situation. It's just my request for that.
And I think to go along with what you're saying, that as Ms. Gardner said, the moral responsibility in this, I would think that there still be plenty of people that, with choice, that their choice is to wear a mask. Maybe the choice of the teacher to wear the mask. And choice of even kids that don't like to wear a mask because they feel like they need to. I mean, I think what you're talking about is that idea of choice.
Chair Hammond, may I, for clarity for everyone,
Sure.
this board knows, but I don't know if those that are listening do know, our bus fleet, which is an integral part of our operations of School District 5 or any district, is managed and owned by the state of South Carolina. It is very clear under the section of school buses, students and staff who ride the student's pupil transportation system to and from school are required to wear face coverings while boarding, riding, and exiting school buses. So although Ms. Blackburn-Hines may question, I have not sought legal advice, if that's something that I need to seek legal advice for, but it has been my understanding that if District 5 were to remove or repeal policy ADD, we would revert to the expectations, and Mr. Lovis asked earlier were there differences, and we've discussed that there are differences, that this would be what we would go back to. But if we're suggesting legal counsel, it is Tuesday evening, and if the effect date is Monday, that is a lot of moving parts for us to be prepared for, to do it with our expectations of performance.
Dr. Milton, I did have a conversation directly with Superintendent Molly Spearman about, you know, what our parameters were as a board, and she did say that school districts could make their mask policies within the schools, but that the State Department of Education owns the buses, and that the buses have to have masks as they're entering the bus and riding the bus. So could we not, as a board, make that motion, that the mask will be adhered to, following State Department of Education, because they own the buses? There's no choice there? Because Dr. Milton's right about that, because I asked. She told me that was the one thing they had total control over, wearing a mask on the bus. So, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I believe with the motion we just passed, we have a mask policy until Monday, correct? So therefore, we do have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for clarification, to make sure. I don't necessarily believe it needs to have a motion to vote on, but I could be wrong. You guys, it's the will of the board.
Well, I think Dr. Melton wanted to know if she should get legal counsel on that. But I mean, it's clear we have to do that. So I don't know that we need to pay a lawyer to tell me what Molly Spearman told me. That's no leeway for us when I was discussing board policies with her.
I haven't been on a school bus in a long time, but I have a question. Are they air conditioned? Okay, thanks.
So the thing I don't know, Dr. Harris, would you know about, would there be a need, since we don't own the buses, then our mask policy couldn't cover that? Do you think we?
Mr. Beanbo supervises transportation.
Oh, okay.
And we do have some buses, not all buses have air conditioning, Ms. Huddle, and not all buses are equipped with security cameras. But Mr. Beanbo, when it comes to the requirements, and I know Mr. Beanbo, Mr. Wiseman isn't here this evening, but could you answer that question with confidence?
Yes, ma'am. The State Department does dictate the school buses because they own all of our buses. We own activity buses, they own school buses. It is a requirement for them to get on our bus, ride the bus to and from school. They're required to have masks. We have no leeway on that. We have no leeway according to the state board policy.
So we would not need, we have no power over it, so we don't need to make any motion. That'll be mask.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Thank
I
you,
have a
Mr.
question.
Lovelace.
Are there any other areas in the, with the State Department of Education and where their requirements would, overrule the requirements of the school board, of our school district?
Well, I think I don't know if Dr. Melton has a different answer, but I was told, I called the State Department and found that, and I think Ms. Hines has called. So that the buses was the only thing I was told they had to override over our policies. Ms. Hines? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? I thought your hand was up. I apologize. Any other? Ms. Gardner?
I just want to point out, as a parent who makes her children ride the bus, some of the buses don't have air conditioning, and even if they do, I don't know if it's set up this way on purpose, but a lot of times the bus driver doesn't turn it on very high. So I'm just going to put that out there. They turn it down because they're cold. They've been in the bus longer, and it's coming from the front. It's supposed to come out through all of it, but I will say my kids always get off the bus very sweaty. Putting that out there.
That's the way kids do on a bus. They're playing too. Ms. Huddle?
So I understand that policy will stay in effect. So, and I think we had agreed earlier we could do another policy if we needed to. Should we do that? Should we do a face covering on school bus policy? And maybe that's a question for Dr. Melton. I want to make it as easy as possible.
Would you feel better about that, Dr. Melton?
I don't think it's necessary, Ms. Huddle, because when we revert to what the department requires, we would have to make sure that we honored this. And of course, when it comes to face coverings and masks, because interpretation is going to vary of those that are listening, I need clarity when it comes to the impressions of the board or whether it's legal counsel sought of the joint resolution of COVID Liability Immunity Act. So this is something that I've emailed the board, but once the governor signed Senate Bill 147, I'm very sensitive to protecting not just immediate needs, but needs that may come up in the near future or several years from now.
You want some clarification?
I don't have interest in being a district that starts something first and then we set precedent. I want to lead the state, but not in this regard. If that makes sense, Ms. Hammond.
I do. As a matter of fact, I would like to say, with the confidence I have in Dr. Melton in leading her leading District 5, the day-to-day operations, Dr. Melton. I think that Senate Bill 417 and the State Department of Education's guidelines, and that's what they are, guidelines, but I think they're there for superintendents to use, and I certainly would have confidence in any needs that you have as a result of this, what passed here tonight. We meet our regular meeting on the 10th. I know it's only 3 days, but you have 3 days in there. If there's something you need to bring to us, that things can be your discretion and your guidelines based on the State Department. So I'm very open to Dr. Melton having that, that leeway. We don't have a policy, we don't have a mandate, but we have got to be sure if there's any liability with the Senate Bill 417. I think if I read it right, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm not a lawyer, but it basically was saying we needed something in place, right, Dr. Melton, that proved we had precautions for COVID. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. We have to show that we are in compliance with health officials' guidance and regulations so that we offer assurance that we are acting within compliance of recommendations, then we would be considered a safe harbor based upon this legislation. And Ms. Hammond, we're accustomed to meeting on Monday evenings, the board is, and today's Tuesday, of course, and board packet goes out on Thursday, midday. So I hope that would help with some context of
what we can find out by
the
that
schedule
time.
for tomorrow, because for us to be successful for board packet on Thursday for Monday night, depending on what the board is seeking, this definitely is becoming the item for tomorrow's work of the staff. So I would encourage the staff to start looking at their calendars, and we would need to change appointments this evening, that tomorrow's schedules will be changed.
Yes.
Item number, I think 16, we discussed, okay. Update number 16 to the reentry. Excuse me for losing my words, but I would like, I'm not saying that this is all inclusive, because I understand that, you have 3 work days to do it, but would you bring us for the May 10th board meeting, as part of your superintendent's report, all the items that you know of at that time, not all inclusive and not, but could you possibly bring us the items that we need to be concerned with since this vote tonight? And that's just a request,
Yes, sir, I will definitely make that a priority for tomorrow, but I believe I heard May 10th was a date of activity. So Monday morning, there could be change, and then Monday evening, if there are items that I bring to your attention, could there possibly be changes to follow that for my clarity?
That's the reason I asked that, and we would put that as an action item if we had to.
And you all see the disruption that could potentially cause.
Absolutely.
We should have done longer. All right. I think people want to go home. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Gardner,
I move that we adjourn.
is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hogan seconds. All those in favor? All those opposed?